Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you've been following along, you know we've been pretty deep in the shadows of Ravenloft lately.
Yeah, getting lost in the mists.
Exactly. But, once a month, we like to pivot, do something completely different. Tonight's definitely different. We're tackling a debate, a big one.
It feels like the right time, doesn't it? I mean, things out there in the real world are tense. Really tense.
You could say that again. Political assassinations, governments getting shaky. Feels like civil discourse is just gone sometimes.
Just shouting matches, yeah. It's a high-pressure cooker out there.
Which maybe weirdly brings us to tonight. Because we're going to try and settle what really matters in this moment. We're going to try once and for all to answer, what is the proper way to play tabletop role-playing games?
And this isn't just like a casual chat. This is necessary, maybe. The tensions in the hobby mirror the outside world in some strange ways. We have to talk about it.
Absolutely. The gloves are off tonight. We're diving straight into the sources, the arguments, the schism that's dividing the community.
And to really get why it's so intense now, you kind of have to look back, right? There's this ghost story haunting the whole thing.
The Satanic Panic.
Mm-hmm. The 1980s. It's hard for maybe, younger players today to really grasp how big a deal that was.
Oh, definitely. It wasn't just a few concerned parents. We're talking major societal forces, churches, politicians. The media convinced D&D was this genuine moral threat, corrupting the youth.
That's exactly it. The fear was palpable. You had groups like AD&D, remember them? Bothered about Dungeons and Dragons.
Vaguely, yeah. Sounds like something out of a different era.
Right. And they were campaigning hard. They weren't just worried. They were convinced the game was directly linked to, actual crimes, murders, suicides.
They pointed to specific cases, didn't they? Like that really tragic one in Ontario.
Yeah, the 14-year-old boy admitted strangling a girl and her brother. And the immediate media leap was, he played D&D. He was a dungeon master. The game itself was basically put on trial.
And the fear wasn't about dice rolls or mechanics. It was deeper. It was about, spiritual corruption. This quasi-religious language in the game, mystic figures, magic spells.
And the idea that magic came from, your life force, your soul, that really freaked people out.
People were literally told to burn their books.
Yeah.
I remember hearing stories about the original deities and demigods going to the fireplaces.
Yeah.
That shows the level of perceived danger. It was serious.
And that core conflict, players saying, hey, it's just a game. It's about fun, adventure, not winning or real evil. Versus this external view, seeing it as a social poison. Well, that conflict hasn't gone away.
No, it's just moved inside the community, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That's the big shift. Now it's players versus players. The escape and fun crowd versus this other faction demanding more moral responsibility, political awareness, social commentary baked in.
Exactly. It's the same fundamental tension, just playing out differently.
So our mission tonight is to really pull that apart. We've got the old guard versus the corporations, OSR versus modern systems, the whole indie game scene trying to sidestep AAA politics.
And the really thorny stuff, right? Safety tools, censorship debates, whether politics even belong in role-playing. Should the story always come first, or do political beliefs have to shape the game?
It's a lot. This is the deep dive into the heart of the conflict. So let's start Act 1, the battles for D&D's soul. And that really centers on legacy, doesn't it? Specifically, Gary Gygax.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets personal and, frankly, pretty nasty online. You've got Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, the corporate owners really clashing with the old school fans, the ones who get hit with that label.
Grognards. Yeah, kind of dismissive, isn't it?
Very. And the flashpoint, according to the sources we looked at, came from inside WOT itself. A senior designer, Jason Tandro, wrote a foreword for a new book.
And it wasn't subtle.
Not at all. He basically said old school critics weren't even worth listening to, which is, pretty bad. But the line that just detonated everything, he reportedly called grognards a subspecies of human.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's not dismissing criticism. That's like declaring war on your own fan base, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. You can't say that about the people who, built the hobby and expect them to just keep buying your stuff. The reaction was, well, predictable.
Furious. Immediate. Public.
Exactly. We saw figures like Robert Cowan, an original player, longtime community guy, just unload.
Yeah.
He compared Tandro's words to how the Spanish conquistadors viewed the Aztecs.
Whoa.
Yeah. Savages deserving deprecation, killing, and looting. He saw it as fundamentally dehumanizing. saying, Tandra's bosses, watch Hasbro, let this happen, to push a more modern, maybe commercially safer version of the game.
Basically throwing the old fans under the bus for a new market.
That was the accusation. And then things got even stranger. The whole thing went mainstream, almost.
Elon Musk got involved.
Right. He jumped in, defended Gygax, said Watch Hasbro should burn in hell for trashing the legacy. Strong words.
Very. But wasn't there more? Didn't he ask something else?
That was the kicker. After the outrage, he just asked, how much is it?
Asking the price of D&D, like the whole company.
Yeah. Suddenly, it wasn't just a fan spat. It was about corporate control, IP value. Musk wasn't just venting. He was hinting maybe that this perceived betrayal could be fixed with enough capital, like a hostile takeover driven by nostalgia.
That's a whole other level of drama.
Yeah.
But, okay, we need the nuance here too, right? Because not everyone rushes to defend Gygax uncritically.
No, definitely not. While lots of people defended his contribution, others argued that, just ignoring problematic aspects of the past actually harms the game now.
There was that quote, wasn't there? From Gygax himself, way back.
Yeah, a 1975 fanzine. He apparently wrote, "Damn right, I'm sexist." And the argument from some corners is, look, you have to address that stuff. You can't just sweep it under the rug if you want D&D to be this big cultural pillar.
So the argument is that failing to evolve, failing to confront that baggage, actually holds the game back.
That's the point being made, yeah. It's this internal debate. Do we preserve tradition warts and all, or do we need to, purify it to move forward?
Which leads us straight into the mechanics, the systems. The old school Renaissance OSR versus the modern D20 systems like 5e. This isn't just about which dice you roll, is it? It's deeper.
Oh, way deeper. It's a clash of philosophies about what TTRPGs are even for. OSR isn't really a single rule set. It's more of an approach.
Right, emphasizing player ingenuity, player skill over just what's on the character sheet.
Exactly. It's about what you, the player, can figure out at the table, not just ticking off a skill proficiency.
I saw it described as having a kind of punk rock DIY spirit, which I like, standing against the slick, corporate, maybe bloated feel of the newer editions.
That captures it pretty well.
Yeah.
And the key traits are really different from modern D&D. First off, lethality. It's high.
Characters are squishy.
Very squishy. Players back then and in OSR games now, they expect characters to die quickly. GMs aren't afraid to kill them, even the whole party sometimes. TPKs happen.
And that changes everything, doesn't it? Makes the world feel actually dangerous, forces you to be smart, cautious.
Absolutely. Second big thing, exploration over combat. And crucially, how you get experience points. In old school, it's mostly from finding treasure, hauling gold out of the dungeon, not just killing monsters.
That's a huge difference. You're actually better off avoiding fights if you can.
Yeah.
Sneaking past the dragon, tricking the guards.
Exactly, because the gold is the goal. And fighting is just risk. It pushes creative problem solving, not just hacking and slashing.
And third, the DM's role.
Yeah, it's more like the original Gygax Arneson style.
Yeah.
The DM is more of an impartial referee describing this dangerous world rather than a co-storyteller focused on the player's character arcs. And solving problems often relies on actual physical ingenuity described by the player.
The classic example being the 10-foot pole.
Perfect example. In, say, 5e, you suspect a trap. You probably say, I search for traps, roll perception. Your character's skill determines success.
Right. Roll high, find it. Roll low, maybe trigger it.
But in OSR, the DM might just describe a corridor. The player says, okay, I prod the floor ahead of me with my 10-foot pole, tapping every square foot. The DM might just say, okay, you tap a section and hear a click, you found a pressure plate. No roll needed.
Because the player's action, their ingenuity, solved the problem, not a number on their sheet.
Precisely. The player's cleverness is rewarded directly. It feels more emergent, less constrained by pre-written abilities.
So the critique of modern D20, like 5th edition, starts to make sense from that OSR perspective. It's seen as too focused on character skills, too protective of the characters.
Yeah, prioritizing a smooth story over genuine risk and discovery. Some critics call it a flavorless concoction because the danger feels muted.
The argument being, if the stakes are low, if the system keeps saving you with advantages, saving throws, low damage, where's the thrill? Where's the real accomplishment?
Right. If you know you're basically safe, that need for clever thinking, that adrenaline rush OSR players value, it kind of fades away.
And this whole philosophical clash ties directly into the business side, doesn't it? The corporate shadow. Which brings up that argument. Should creators just shut up about politics?
This one gets pragmatic, maybe. Or just cynical, depending on your view. The core business argument is pretty stark. Your job is to sell games, not alienate potential customers with your personal political takes.
Especially for smaller creators, right? Indie developers, people using Kickstarter, they need every sale.
Exactly. Getting dragged into online political battles, making statements that don't directly promote your product, it's seen as just shooting yourself in the foot. Unforced errors, basically. Bad for business survival.
And they point to the AAA video game industry as the cautionary tale, right?
Yeah.
The budgets there are just insane.
Astronomical. We're talking hundreds of millions easily for a big title. That rumored $2 billion for GTA 6. I mean, whether it's true or not, the scale is immense.
So if you've spent that kind of money, you absolutely cannot afford to lose even a small chunk of your audience over a political message they don't like. The financial risk is just too high.
And it connects to why people play games in the first place. There's data suggesting consuming political news, especially online, ramps up anxiety, hurts mental health.
So the argument is people play games to escape that stress, right? For relief.
So if developers then inject explicit political stuff into these huge escapist games, they're kind of defeating the purpose.
Yeah.
And maybe even adding to the anxiety the player is trying to get away from.
So players just tune out, look elsewhere.
That's the claim. And that's where the indie and OSR scenes come in again. They're positioned as the alternative. Lower budgets mean less financial risk in being niche. They can avoid the political tightrope walking of the AAA giants. It's that DIY spirit again.
And that's why they're gaining ground. Because they offer something different, something less corporate and maybe less overtly politicized in that specific way.
That's definitely part of the narrative. Which brings us to this idea of propaganda. We should probably define that term, or at least bring in how some sources define it. Edward Bernays.
The father of public relations. His definition is pretty chilling.
Yeah. He called propaganda the executive arm of the invisible government. Not like posters and leaflets, but something much more subtle.
He argued that society is too chaotic, so an intelligent minority needs to shape public opinion, guide the masses, basically, for their own good and for societal order.
He saw it as necessary. But the implication, which critics jump on, is that it's fundamentally anti-democratic. It's about manipulation by a select few in their own interest, bypassing genuine public will.
So how does that connect back to TTRPGs? If a game is seen as pushing a specific agenda too hard,
then critics argue it stops being art, stops being an open-ended game, and becomes just propaganda. It's the executive arm of whatever ideology, corporate or political, is behind it. It dictates thought rather than enabling play. It robs the game of its freedom.
Which really sets the stage for Act 2. The fight over morality within the game world. Do politics belong in the fiction itself? Should we be decolonizing the monster manual?
Yeah, that phrase pops up. Sources like Sly Flourish's Forge of Foes argue that traditional D&D, well, it has this starkly colonialist view built in, especially towards sapient enemies.
Orcs, goblins, kobolds, creatures often written as just inherently evil, existing only to be obstacles, to be killed by the civilized adventurers.
Exactly. And the argument is, look, colonialism's legacy is tied to a lot of what's wrong with the real world. So being aware of that and actively rejecting those colonialist tropes in our fantasy, it makes the games better, more responsible, more thoughtful.
But the counter-argument is just as fierce, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just outright dismissal.
Oh, yeah. Terms like lunacy, so silly. The claim is that real-world colonialism is totally irrelevant to high fantasy worlds. And trying to remove those civilized versus barbaric tropes actually makes the games boring.
They point to the classics, right? Like Conan or Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely. Would Lord of the Rings be better if we got, like, deep background stories for every orc commander attacking Helm's Deep? They argue no, it would ruin the epic feel. Removing these fantasy staples, uncivilized hordes threatening civilization, is seen as cowardly, anti-intellectual, trying to sanitize fiction.
And this whole debate just seems to crystallize around one creature, the orc. It's like the ultimate battleground for these ideas.
It really is. You've got side A, objective evil.
Their argument is rooted in the game's cosmology, right?
Mm-hmm.
D&D has literal gods, objective alignments. Orcs were created by Grumush, an evil war god.
Exactly. So in that fantasy context, they are objectively evil. It's inherent part of their species makeup created by divine forces, trying to apply our real-world relative morality, where evil is a choice, to this completely different objective fantasy reality. They say it just doesn't make sense. It breaks the world building.
Okay, so that's side A. What about side B? The racist trope argument.
Side B looks at the language used to describe orcs. Inherently warlike, brutish, ugly, animalistic, maybe less intelligent.
And they say that language sounds awfully familiar.
Precisely. It mirrors the exact kind of language used throughout real human history to dehumanize specific groups, to justify oppression and violence. So even if it's unintentional, using those tropes in fantasy is problematic because it echoes and potentially reinforces harmful real-world biases.
So Side B argues that even if it's fantasy, the creators are drawing from a reality steeped in racism, so those tropes inevitably creep in. And the solution?
Change it. Change the lore. Change the descriptions. Make the game feel safer, more inclusive, especially for players who might be sensitive to that kind of historically loaded language. They argue it's an easy fix and the responsible thing to do.
And Lord of the Rings comes up again here, because Tolkien himself wasn't entirely simplistic, was he?
No, not at all. His world has that stark duality, Gondor versus Mordor, light versus shadow. And some peoples, like the Haradrim from the south, they're often presented as just faceless enemies, Sauron's tools.
Linked maybe to old Anglo-Saxon ideas of distant dark lands, the Ethiops of Sigilwara land, peoples known only as other.
Right. Tolkien was building a mythology, and those perspectives weren't really present in his source material, but then there's that one moment.
With Sam Gamgee.
In Ithilien.
Exactly. After a battle, Sam sees a dead Haradrim soldier, and the narration just stops, and Sam wonders, who was this man? What was his name? Was he really evil, or was he just forced or tricked into marching all this way? Would he rather have stayed home in peace? That single moment of humanization just cracks the whole objective evil enemy facade wide open, doesn't it? It forces you, the reader, to consider the possibility.
It does, and it shows the complexity was always there, baked into the art, which is why when modern readers encounter some of Tolkien's descriptions, they might feel that uncomfortable echo of real-world racial ideas, and why the orc debate stays so heated.
Okay, so from the morality of monsters in the game world, we pivot to morality at the table, the safety tool showdown. And this is where the rhetoric gets really intense.
Yeah, some of the language used here is pretty shocking, honestly, on both sides, but particularly in the opposition.
Let's start with the argument for safety tools. How is that framed?
It's framed as basic respect and consideration. Tools like the X card, lines and veils, consent checklists, they're presented as necessary boundaries, like seatbelts in a car.
The idea being you discuss them in session 0, get everyone on the same page about what topics are okay, what's off limits, lines, and what should be fade to black veils.
Right. It's about making sure everyone feels comfortable and safe so they can actually engage more deeply, even with difficult themes, because they know their boundaries will be respected. It's presented as enabling play, not restricting it.
Okay. Now, the opposition. How do they see these tools?
As tyranny. Literally, that's the word used. The tyranny of the broken. They see safety tools as mechanisms of censorship, imposing illiberal restrictions on free expression at the table.
Wow. Tyranny. That's strong.
Incredibly strong. They argue these tools barely existed, less than a decade ago, and now suddenly all the big RPG companies are pushing them. They see it as a coordinated effort to limit mature themes and free artistic exploration in gaming.
And the attacks get personal, don't they? Aimed at the people who use the tools.
Extremely personal. We found sources flat out claiming that only 3 types of people use safety tools. The truly mentally ill, people who are just virtue signaling or attention-seeking spoiled brats.
Yeah, it's brutal, just dismissing anyone who might want or need these tools.
It is. The argument continues. If you're genuinely that fragile, maybe TTRPGs, which are open-ended and unpredictable, aren't for you. The game table isn't therapy, they say. Forcing the whole group to censor themselves for one person kills the creative freedom.
There's also an argument about GM authority, right?
Yeah, the GM is traditionally the final arbiter, the benevolent monarch of the game. Safety tools are seen as undermining that authority, taking responsibility away from the GM, and, quote, patronizing thinking adults by implying they can't handle tough subjects.
The ultimate claim being that games run this way will suffer, become bland, maybe even just propaganda, because requiring explicit consent stifles difficult, mature art.
But let's look again at how proponents see them, like the traffic light system, green, yellow, red. It's not always about a hard stop. Yellow means, okay, slow down. We're near a sensitive area. Let's tread carefully. It's meant as subtle communication negotiation.
So from that perspective, it's about mutual respect and finding ways to navigate tricky stuff together, not just shutting things down.
Exactly. Which leads to the question, how far should games go in tackling tough moral issues? And that brings us to a really interesting, maybe extreme example, The war crime score in the Veil Riders TTRPG.
Right, this isn't just a discussion tool. It's a core mechanic built around real-world morality.
Deliberately. It's designed to simulate the horror and moral compromises of war, stripping away that feeling of consequence-free violence you often get in fantasy games.
How does it work, exactly?
You have a war crime score. It goes down, which is bad when you commit actions defined as war crimes in the game's context. Things like using child soldiers, mistreating POWs, destroying civilian property.
And it's not just a number. There are actual in-game consequences.
Severe consequences. A low score adds dread, makes you hunted by military police or temple investigators. There are even mechanics like morale penalties. If your squad faces enemies using child soldiers, your characters might take an immediate hit to their grit score for that fight. It forces a reaction through the mechanics.
So the game is deliberately making you uncomfortable, forcing you to weigh desperation against morality. If your back's against the wall, do you commit an atrocity to survive?
That's the core philosophical question it poses. It directly challenges that idea of games as pure escapism. It argues TTRPGs are mature art, and mature art must grapple with these dark, difficult themes, even if it makes players feel guilty or conflicted.
That idea that you can't escape these issues brings us neatly into Act 3. The realization that maybe truly apolitical art, including games, is just impossible.
It seems that way, yeah. You have the explicit politics, like the war crime score, a deliberate message, but then there's the implicit politics.
The cultural baggage, the assumptions and biases baked into the setting, the rules, the art, just because of the society the creator lives in.
Exactly. And the argument is that implicit stuff is often way more powerful because we absorb it without even realizing it's political. It just feels normal.
And this is where the hypocrisy charge comes in, right? People complain about some things being political but not others.
That's the critique. Someone might see a game featuring, say, lesbians or non-binary characters and yell, "Politics, keep it out."
But they might not see anything political about a mainstream military shooter game that's drenched in themes of, American foreign policy, specific views on guns, violence as the main solution.
Right. The argument is that the unquestioned normalization of violence or militarism is a political statement, reflecting certain cultural values. But because it's the dominant status quo, it doesn't get flagged as political in the same way.
So according to this view, even trying to be apolitical is political. It's basically endorsing the current state of things.
Pretty much. You can't escape the cycle. Media reflects culture. Culture shapes creators. Creators make new media reflecting that culture. Complaining about politics in games often just means you don't like the change being reflected.
Which raises the power question. Who gets to decide what's acceptable? Who defines the subs? And should creators just cave to whoever shouts loudest?
We saw that play out with that Ace of Spades board game issue, didn't we?
Yeah, the controversy over the card art, a black man in chains. Some players called it blatant racism.
And the publisher, Diver, pulled the art, apologized. But then critics on the other side called that apology performative virtue signaling, saying they bent the knee to the lefties.
It puts creators in a terrible spot, doesn't it? Cater to the vocal critics demanding change. Stay silent and hope it blows over to protect sales. Stick to your guns artistically and face the fire.
It's a tough dilemma. But there's another perspective here, maybe a more constructive one, about cultural depth. We found a writer talking about how they hate seeing cultures in D&D get stripped away and boiled down into a generic goo.
Interesting. So instead of avoiding cultural specifics for fear of offense, they argue for more depth.
Exactly. Their point was that studying real-world cultures with all their complexities, good and bad, is vital for rich world building. Otherwise, your fantasy world just ends up feeling like modern-day America cosplay with pointy ears.
That pushes back against the keep it simple, keep it escapist idea. It suggests that engaging with cultural depth, even if it brings in complex or uncomfortable ideas, makes the game better, not worse. Demands more from everyone, though.
It does. So, after wading through all this, the grognards versus WOTC, objective evil versus racist tropes, safety tools versus free expression, we land back at that big question. Can people with fundamentally different political views even sit down and play D&D together anymore without it exploding?
The sources we looked at, they weren't super optimistic about the public discourse, were they? Some describe the divide as almost tribal creators versus parasites, the productive versus the purely ideological. Makes compromise sound pretty difficult.
Yeah, in the online spaces, it feels pretty intractable sometimes. Which leads to that nagging doubt, does any of this actually matter? Are we just arguing about imaginary orcs while the real world has much bigger problems?
Is it just a waste of time?
Maybe. But the practical solution that emerged, the only real point of agreement perhaps, is focus on the table, your specific table.
Because TTRPGs are inherently inconsistent, right?
Yeah.
Every group is different.
Totally different. Every table is its own little microculture. It has its own rules, its own vibe, its own accepted norms. The house rules are king.
So maybe the answer isn't to win the big online debate, but just to find or build a table culture that works for you and the people you actually play with. Except that local consensus is the only law that really matters.
It feels like the most pragmatic path forward, doesn't it? You choose your game, you choose your group, you establish your table's culture together.
Yeah, because it's clear, after all this, that the act of playing these games, what legacies we value, what monsters mean, how we treat each other at the table, it's all tangled up with the bigger fights happening outside.
Inescapably.
So the final thought we want to leave you with, something to chew on. If this game space really is a microcosm, if these arguments reflect bigger societal battles, what does it mean? What does the invention of a war crime score or a corporation dismissing its founding fans as a subspecies actually tell us about where we might be heading outside the game?
Right. Is the push for safety tools a sign of growing empathy and necessary inclusion? Or is it a slide towards censorship and fragility? Is the rise of indie DIY games a sign that the old corporate structures are failing, eating their own past, or just a niche market finding its feet?
Lots to think about. The debate definitely isn't over, and we genuinely want to hear what you think. Where do you fall on all this? What's the proper way to play for you? Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, tell us your take. And hey, if there's a specific RPG book, maybe an old D&D module, you want us to give the deep dive treatment, let us know that too. We really do read the comments, and it helps shape what we cover.
Absolutely. So please do like, subscribe, share this with someone who might find it interesting, and ring that notification bell. Next week, we are heading back into the mists, back to Ravenloft, and we'll be sticking with those source books for a while. Thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.